Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a truly fascinating and honestly unexpected journey. We're going to connect the visceral, fluid, highly physical act of surfing a wave directly to 18th century epistemology. I know, it sounds like quite the leap, but I promise you, the physical geometry of a surfboard actually holds profound secrets about how the human mind works, how we process sensory input, and how we ultimately construct our reality. We're going to unpack some absolutely brilliant insights from designer and philosopher Dan Weber today. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the synchrony of surfing, basically what it actually means to ride a wave. Second, we'll map that directly onto Immanuel Kant's philosophical model of the intellect. Third, we'll break down the three axes of synthesis, which is really the geometric core of our analysis today. And finally, we'll explore how all of this relates to mind, motion, and autism. I assure you, this jump from surfboard design to philosophy is going to be a seamless and perfectly logical ride. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the synchrony of surfing. To really grasp the philosophy here, we first have to focus on the pure physical sensation and the deep intuition required to carve across a wave. Consider this quote from P.J. Flynn, written back in 1987. It perfectly frames surfing as far more than just a sport. Flynn points out that a surfer uses perceptive prolepsis and analepsis. Now, in plain terms, that just means the surfer is simultaneously drawing on their past surfing experience, interpreting the immediate present of the water, and projecting the possible future unfoldings of the wave. The surfer dances with the wave in a state of what philosopher Martin Heidegger called anticipatory resoluteness. The past, the present, and the future are completely and beautifully unified in a single action. So, what we are left with is surfing as a true spatio-temporal nexus. It's a continuous, high-speed dance of interpreting the current reality and anticipating the immediate future based on the past. Because of this incredibly dynamic state, surfing serves as the absolute perfect physical metaphor for how human beings process reality itself.
Moving right along to Section 2, Kant's model of intellect.
We are now about to use our surfing metaphor to decode one of the most famous philosophical texts in history, Immanuel Kant's 1781 Critique of Pure Reason. Kant was essentially obsessed with figuring out how we turn raw, chaotic sensory data into organized, usable knowledge. To understand his model, we need to clarify two crucial terms. First is synopsis, which comes from the Greek meaning to view together. Kant noted that every sensory state contains a massive variety of different elements. It's a passive intake of raw information. But corresponding to this is synthesis, meaning to put together. For Kant, passive receptivity can only turn into actual knowledge when it is combined with spontaneous, active processing. So think of it this way. Synopsis is the raw wave, and synthesis is how we actually write it. Kant argued that this active mental processing, this synthesis, happens in three distinct sequential steps that form the foundation of our entire intellect. Step 1 is apprehending representations and intuition, meaning we just grasp the raw sensory data. Step 2 is recognizing them in a concept, meaning we give that data a framework or context. And Step 3 is reproducing them in imagination, meaning we assemble it all together to fully experience our reality.
Which brings us to Section 3, three axes of synthesis.
We are now at the absolute core of our explainer. We're going to look closely at exactly how the rotational axes of surfing correspond perfectly to Kant's model of the intellect. To do this, surfboard designers use a really clever trick. They ignore the shape of the wave, reducing it to a flat plane, and they reduce the surfer's complex movements to three distinct rotational axes on the board itself. Let's look at the first axis. This rotational axis traces a circle on a horizontal plane. You can visualize it kind of like the Earth's equator. If a surfboard only rotates on this horizontal plane, its interaction with the wave effectively has no impact. This is what we call a monadic relation. It's defined solely by the wave itself. Philosophically, this maps perfectly onto Kant's first step, raw, uninterpreted perception. It's just the input happening to you. Now, let's look at the second axis. This one traces a circle on any vertical plane, much like the lines of longitude encircling the globe from north to south. When the surfboard rotates on this vertical axis, it causes the board to physically penetrate the water of the wave. This creates a dyadic relation, an active intersection between the board and the wave. In Kantian terms, this intersection represents the formation of a concept within a context. The mind is now actively engaging with the raw data. Finally, we hit the third axis. This rotational axis traces a circle at right angles to each of the other two axes. At this stage, all the rotational movements combine. The monadic and dyadic relations are absorbed into a triadic relation. This expresses itself as the variable of direction, meaning the surfboard is now actively traversing the surface of the wave, and crucially leaving a physical wake behind it.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the whole shebang ties together. The horizontal rotation, our monadic relation, is Kant's apprehension of raw perception. The vertical penetration gives us our dyadic relation, perfectly matching Kant's recognition of a concept. And finally, the directional traverse creates the triadic relation, seamlessly aligning with Kant's third synthesis, reproduction in the imagination. The physical geometry of how a surfboard interacts with water is quite literally a geometric model for how your intellect processes reality.
This leaves us with a truly profound realization. Remember that wake left by the surfboard traversing the water during the third synthesis? Well, if you look closely, a surfboard's wake is shaped exactly like a breaking wave. The implication here is staggering. Just as the wake mimics the wave, Kant's third synthesis, our active imagination and understanding, shapes itself to perfectly mimic our initial perception.
Now for our final stretch, Section 4, Mind, Motion, and Autism.
We're going to zoom out a bit now to explore how this geometric connection between physical shape and dynamic motion applies directly to human neurology, specifically looking at how our brains process intention. You see, a master surfboard shaper is adjusting the static shape of the board while simultaneously invoking the physical sensation of its future movement through the water. It's an incredible skill. But if that design fails, the board won't absorb into the surfer's movements, and the surfer simply cannot read the wave. According to researchers like Gillies and colleagues, this perfectly mirrors what happens in autism when mirror neurons fail to read the intention behind an action. When there's an impairment in smoothly chaining sequential actions together, the individual struggles to make sense of the wave of the social world.
What is really fascinating here is the contrast in how reality is actually experienced. An autistic savant struggles to engage with the world conventionally, yet they often perceive the underlying fabric of the universe with incredible clarity. Bringing it back to our surfing analogy, the autistic savant is surfing within the wave, almost like a dolphin. They're experiencing reality directly without a mediator. By contrast, the non-autistic mind adopts a more detached perspective. It rides on the surface of the wave, relying heavily on that cognitive surfboard to process and navigate the experience.
So the big takeaway here is this. Our brains decode the world around us, especially the intentions of others, using mirror neurons. And those neurons operate on the exact same principles of encoded physical geometry found in the design of a surfboard. Social intention and meaning are encoded by mirror neurons in our minds in the very same way that the trajectories of complex surfing maneuvers are physically carved and encoded into the fiberglass of a surfboard.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. What board are you using to navigate your own perception of reality? We all rely on invisible frameworks, concepts, and neural structures to ride the constant, crashing waves of daily experience. The next time you find yourself reacting to a complex situation, just pause for a second and consider how you're synthesizing it. Are you riding on the surface, or are you diving within the wave? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating intersection of physics and philosophy with me today. Keep asking questions and keep learning.